Good morning, Frank. Today I had the great pleasure of interviewing Frank Donnelly. Frank's currently a mortgage loan officer and has been for a long time with SunTrust and in the state of Virginia. And Frank cranks out about $3.5–4 million a month. And before we discuss your professional career, everybody always likes to know, I always start with it every time, your background, where you came from and up until you got into the business, and then we'll talk about your early days.
Okay, very good, John. Thank you very much. Let's see, I have been here at SunTrust for 8 years. Prior to that, I was in the mortgage business. In fact, ever since college, I've been in mortgage lending in one sort or another. I started out kind of in the junior varsity positions, did a little swimming pool lending, which was second trust based, did a little, almost like a B paper for about a year, which was good experience, pulled credit reports, actually conducted the settlement, so I got a good background for that, for various parts of the lending business, and went to the University of Maryland, and really right out of that got into real estate lending. So don't know how to do anything else, so I'm glad this has worked out pretty well so far.
Where'd you start off?
Let's see. Started off with Transamerica Financial,
Sure.
And what we were doing is second trust at kind of higher rates for people who had some credit issues, and that is where we really pulled the credit reports, interviewed the applicants, closed the loans, dealt with the title company, so really did everything.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's a couple companies, I think Commercial Credit, which I think has a different name, they used to do that kind of stuff too, where you guys pretty much did everything from soup to nuts, even went out to their homes to settle this stuff.
Absolutely, and it was very good experience.
I'm sure it was.
Something you stay in a whole long time, but you do get your feet wet and learn the various aspects of the business.
Yeah. The money, you just can't make the kind of money you can make in our business, but you're right. It's just like insurance sales. It's excellent training. When you did transition over into the First Trust area, where did you start with? Do you remember?
Sure did. What happened was when I was at Transamerica, the very next office was Payne Weber Mortgage. And I saw the guys who were loan officers there, and I remember at the time, it was my first job out of college, and I had a Chevette. And I do remember seeing a lot of the guys when they'd pull up, remember two had Jaguars. And I went and saw, as an ambitious young guy, went and saw the manager. I said, I do loans, and I think I'm missing something. And he said, well, Frank, these guys are generating their own business, and maybe someday you can get into this kind of business, but right now, keep doing what you're doing. And that gentleman is actually still in the business and has been...
What's his name?
His name is Hugh Seeley. And he was the branch manager, and at that time I didn't really have any contacts in the business, but I was learning, and he said that was a good spot for me. And I was kind of disappointed because the Jaguars look good in the lot, but I did get a feel for what First Trust loan officers did, and that's pretty much a stroke of luck in a sense, and that's why I decided to get into it. I thought I could do well.
When you first got in, what kind of training were you given? It's kind of a loaded question. Some people got great, some got the book and got kicked out the door.
Right, it's like, that I think in the mortgage business is one of those things. And here's a Fannie Mae booklet, and go get 'em, Tiger. Pretty much same thing. In other words, you learn by experience and doing. And actually in the process, you do step on a few minefields, and it is painful to learn that way.
Yes, it is.
But SunTrust has a little more. Now the training here is a little better in that they have a formalized program, and you still learn by doing, but in our business, it's here's the phone, good luck.
You also have SunTrust has an excellent management team, and you have for years. Pat Casey is your regional, of course, who's a legend, and so it does help to have good management in place that recognizes the value of training.
Yeah, the training in the industry has gotten better, but 10 or 15 years ago when I got in, it was not the most scientific process of them all.
When you first got into the business, for those that are new out there listening, what did you do to attract your business? And by that I mean very pointedly, did you go after realtors? And if you did, how did you go about doing it? Did you go after CPAs, attorney? I mean, how did you get your business in that first 6 months, which is always the most difficult?
No question about it. And what I did, I strictly worked on realtors. And once I left Manufacturers Hanover, pretty much I tried a couple companies, and one would give me a shot, and it happened to be the Dime Savings Bank of New York, which later bought North American, is still in the lending business, First Trust business. And at that time, they had a lot of portfolio products which were monthly adjustable, cost of funds armed.
Mm-hmm.
So it was that was excellent because as a loan officer starting back, this was probably in 1988, I remember walking into one real estate office and there were 4 loan officers and 2 agents. So it was not a great time to get in the business. However, the products that we had differentiated us from our competition. So I'd say if someone were new getting into business and you don't have products that are different, that they do need to find a way to differentiate themselves because there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of experienced people out there. So you got to have something different to get a chance to get the first loan from a realtor. Mm-hmm. And that is the main way that I got in the business was strictly calling on realtors. And at that time, I don't know if many loan officers were using alternative sources such as certified financial planners, certified public accountants. It was mainly either you're a builder rep or a realtor rep, one or the other. Now we have a little more variety of people who we can get business from.
Mm-hmm. What did you do specifically to get that realtor business? And where I'm coming from, if I could be a devil's advocate for a minute, you're going into that realtor's office, you're new, you probably, I don't know how old you are now, or you were when you started, but, usually most people are in their 20s when they start off. They look young. And you have all the opposition from the manager saying, doesn't want anybody in back. Well, the rap. Mm-hmm. So how did you get around that, and how did you get direct to the loan officers?
Sure. I'll tell you, I was just like you said, I was probably 25 and looked 21, and maybe you don't have all the confidence in the world at that age. But in those days, it was a little easier to approach the realtors in that the offices, most of the realtor offices were not closed offices, so you could go and talk to the realtors, although most of the busy ones probably didn't want constant interruption. One of the main things that I did was I would target a particular office, and what I would do is I would call on them usually twice per week, which is sometimes I would even get there 3 times a week, and if I did not have a reason to go into that office, I would almost make one up. For example, if I had a pre-qual letter or any letter that, or if I asked a realtor if they needed any brochures or any flyers, I would definitely hand carry them into the office so that I did have a purpose for being there. On Sundays, what I would do is I would cut out in the paper. I would naturally the listing agent's phone number is usually in the open house advertisements. So what I would do is I would look to see which offices or which realtors had that phone number of my target office, and I would go to those open houses. And I'll tell you, especially when there was, the electricity was off or they couldn't have a TV on, some of the realtors who didn't have time for you during the week certainly did. And in fact, I would have people, I'd say, okay, well, I'm going to go to 3 or 4 more offices, and I'd say my goodbyes after going to an open house. And I'd say, hey, Frank, could you come back and tell me more about interest rates? Which obviously they were just kind of, it's better to talk to the rookie loan officer than to be bored. So that worked out very well, and I still have clients to this day who I met through those open houses.
Mm-hmm. I find that interesting. That's exactly how I did my business when I started off in the field. I was a little bit lucky because I'd been the top agent all of Long and Foster, so I had some contacts that were built in, but nonetheless, there's never enough, especially when you're young. And for those that out there listening to this, that's an excellent way. I do talk to a lot of people, interview a lot of people, and a lot have brought up the fact that they do visit new homes, but you're the first one that's raised a very effective way to do it, which ironically I did the same thing, and that is get that phone number out of the newspapers and just trace them back to the offices. And if you've kept good records, then you're able to get out there and you know exactly who's going to be on the house.
Exactly.
Did you bring anything out to when you went on these new home tours? Did you bring any computer presentations then on homes and comps and
sometimes
stuff like
we
that.
do that. If we could pull the listings in advance, we could do an open house spreadsheet, which I think some realtors enjoy that. Another one of my competitors here, what he would do is his wife is a very good Italian cook, so when he came, he would bring some kind of spaghetti or ziti or something that his wife had prepared. I think a lot of realtors looked forward to that, but I was not married at the time, and I think if I would have poisoned more realtors than I would have gotten if I had cooked for them. But I basically brought a current rate sheet, and also sometimes the open house spreadsheet for that home. Sometimes I'd call them in advance. I'd say, I'll bring them by there. But I have, on occasion, brought one or two that were kind of a surprise to the agent. And some liked them, some didn't. Some said, well, my own lender does that kind of thing. So it's hit or miss, but I think it shows everybody that you're trying, you're interested in helping them, and I think that reflects well on you.
When did you first know in this business that you were going to make it?
That is an interesting question. I would say that I can't tell you how happy I was in the beginning when realtors would call me. That, believe it or not, that little thing made me very happy because, again, in the beginning, it was a very slow time in the business, and the realtors literally had their choice of lenders. So I think that when I started to get phone calls on a consistent basis, I remember the first week that I got a call every day I felt like I was, getting there. And it didn't hurt when some of the larger paychecks. In fact, I'd say I got one paycheck in my first year that was 50% of what I'd earned the entire prior year, doing the salaried business. So I think at that point I said, yeah, this beats the B-paper second trust loans.
What about back then pricing? Was that a big issue with you? Is it? I don't want to transition to today right now, but was pricing a problem back then at all?
I would say that there was certainly less it was harder to get information back then, for sure, with the internet, and now the rates are in the newspaper. So I think that while there was price competition, because there were so many first trust lenders out there, I do think that it is tougher now because of the internet and the quick dissemination of information.
What kind of tricks did you use back then when you were looking for realtors in your first couple of years? For example, did you send things out in the mail? Did you have rate sheets? Any kind of tech equipment, beepers, mobile phones?
Right, no question about it. Right from the beginning, we pretty much any of the successful loan officers did have a beeper or a display beeper, whatever the newest gadget was, certainly a cell phone, because agents do, that has not changed. In other words, the fact that realtors want quick response has never changed. They always have, they always will.
Do you think that's, I'd like to interrupt you there and focus on that. When you're talking about service level, if you had to prioritize those things that are important to realtors, where would you rank service level?
I would say even to narrow it down further, in saying that a rapid response is probably, if not the most important, it's got to be in the top 2 or 3. And the reason is that even if you're having a problem, if you communicate to them right away, that goes a long way toward allaying their fears, and then they can allay their customers, whether it be the listing agent or the buying agent. But when there's a problem, especially if there's an open flow of communication, that is priceless to the realtors. I found that for sure.
What else? Do you go take... I'm going to ask you if you can hold the phone back just a touch.
Sure.
When you talk to the realtors, do you take every app? Do you go to settlements?
Especially in the beginning, after you get to a certain level of production, it's very difficult to go to all the loan settlements. Frequently, they occur on the same day of the month. But in the beginning, and in fact, I still from when I used to go to every settlement, I still had agents. One in particular that I have seen exactly one time in my life 10 years ago, and I still get business from her, maybe only a few deals per year, but I met her at a settlement. She was very impressed, and still, although she's located too far away for me to constantly call on, I still get business with her even up to last week, and I think I met her probably 9 or 10 years ago from a real estate settlement. I would say from a marketing standpoint, that is, I would do that in the top. If I do three things when I'm new, I would go to do the real estate settlements. First of all, you learn a lot, and second of all, you could pick up a new listing agent, and you definitely cement the relationship with the person who gave you the business, who's typically the selling agent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And especially, and I agree, there does reach a certain level when you're doing the kind of business you do, where it really becomes physically impossible to attend all the settlements, sometimes any of them. But I think for those new people out there, even those that have been in business for a year, year and a half, that are, starting to plug along a little bit, going to settlements is, I think, way at the top of the list there. For the reasons you just enunciated, especially meeting both the listing and the selling agents there. Mm-hmm. It's an opportunity to spread your business.
Right. If you go to the settlements and then follow up in writing, add them definitely to your database, which is another thing. If I was going to do 2 or 3 things to really get going, I would certainly have a database, attend the settlements, and build relationships, carefully chosen relationships, in ways that there's no one way to do that, and each person is different. But I would say selecting the right people with whom to build a relationship is critical. Life is too short for us to deal with realtors or builders or CPAs that we don't like to deal with, and there are plenty of people out there who we would mesh with. But once we find those, building that relationship is a key to getting any kind of business.
Well, it is a relationship business. Do you take it to a level where you try, and I'm not trying to say this artificially, where you try and become their friend in the sense that you socialize or go to golfing or football events with them, or?
Sure.
Where do you take these relationships?
Right. I would say that it is almost natural when you're spending a lot of time and you find people that you like and people that you trust. It's almost natural to become friends. And I go to tons of events with realtors. And in fact, I've been to, and you really know when you're in when you start to do loans for their children, or their personal good friends. Mm-hmm. Also, I've been to some of my agents' children's christenings, personal birthday parties. In fact, one of my realtors who just bought a boat is having my wife and I out there on the boat, but it's a natural progression. Some people, and again, in our business, especially when you're new, sometimes these guys are in their 20s and many of the realtors are in their 50s, mm-hmm. So they may not become your best friend and drinking buddy, but to socialize, especially for an outgoing, like I'm an extroverted person, it's a natural.
When you do you take you said you were using a database. Do you use something like ACT or Goldmine or?
I use ACT, and I would mm-hmm. also say that one of the things that brought me to a higher level of production is the fact that I've used ACT for probably I would say 7 years or 8 years now. Mm-hmm. So I was like one of the earlier adapters of ACT, and I found
yeah, you are. I use ACT myself.
Mm-hmm. And I have found that the speed with which you can communicate when you have a database set up is critical. For instance, we've had times when we've had a hot product. We know that the investors are not going to be able to support the kind of production that we have for long, but we got that information out there so quickly to our current customers that I remember in 1 month I did, I think, $3 million worth of one product, and we only had the product for 2 months. So I would say of the allocation of $10 million that maybe 30 or 40 loan officers had, I was able to do about $3 million of it because I hit the database very quickly. Now, that's just one example.
I think it's a great example. I tout ACT, but there's others like Goldmine and stuff that are pretty close. I like ACT, and ought to get paid for doing all this with them. But I like it because of the integration, and you can hit one button and go into an email, and I use Outlook. And go into the web and set up letters and sort and collate and it's such an incredible tool when you use it in conjunction with something like Outlook. It just makes communication faster, and time is the currency of the realm today. And when you have a product, to be able to get it out, to email it out to 40 people as an attachment, within an hour, that it's just something you couldn't have even done 7, 8 years ago.
True.
And I also I get a little distressed, a little upset when I see loan officers, and there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of them out there going to be listening to this, who really do not have a database. They do not want to learn a computer, or if they do, they don't want to take the time to set up these type of vehicles that can ensure success and make the difference between making $70,000 a year and making $125, $150.
Yeah, you don't. All loan officers may not be computer savvy, and for those people, it's not a choice anymore of whether to learn it or not. It's whether you're going to learn it or whether an assistant is going to learn it, because even in our market, I read a statistic the other day that said there's about 50% less mortgage loan officers than there were at the beginning of 1994. So in 6 years, there has been attrition of about 50%, and there's still as much business or more being done. So what's happening is the big loan officers are getting bigger, and the smaller ones are going by the wayside. And if you're going to get to that critical mass, you must be on the computer, no question about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it doesn't mean, I think, and feel free to disagree with me, it doesn't mean you have to be 100% computerized. I'll give you a good example of this. There are a lot of loan officers, top loan officers that I interview that are obviously very computer literate, but they purposely, I'm not saying, that didn't even ask you whether you do it, but they will purposely still take a hand app and they'll enter it in their computer as soon as they walk out the door. But they like that feel of low tech, looking at somebody, asking them, writing it down, creating that kind of bond. But that being said, once they get out, they're on that computer, and
then it's on the computer for sure.
Yeah, and if you're not computerized today, it sounds a little bit like preaching here, but if you're not on the computer today and you're not willing to learn, you're an anachronism today.
True, and also, again, as the business consolidates, I see the margins coming out somewhat of each loan, so that the loan officers who are going to be successful are going to have to do more and more loans, perhaps at a lower volume, and there's going to, more and more loans at a lower margin.
Sure.
So as that volume kicks up, the efficiencies are going to start becoming more and more important, and that's where the computer comes in. So a lot of people have been able to be successful up to now without it, but going forward, it's going to get tougher and tougher and tougher. And again, it doesn't have to be the loan officer, but someone on the loan officer's team does have to be able to do it.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about the internet, and specifically, I happen to know the market that you work in. I know it's a very sophisticated area, a high-income area compared to other areas of the country. Are you finding people that first off, that are coming direct to you before they come to realtors, people that you're finding, even if they're going to a realtor, have been on the internet searching for information? What are you finding out there that's been a noticeable change in the last couple of years? Sure.
Well, certainly the Northern Virginia area, I think I heard the other day that 60% of the world's internet traffic comes through Northern Virginia. Of course, we have AOL, PSINet, UUNet, MicroStrategy, all these companies, and there's thousands more, are all here, MCI, WorldCom, or tons of them. And so certainly we have some of the most computer-savvy people around, and I am finding that while many of them use the internet as a tool to shop and learn, most of them are still coming to a live person who they can talk to, because it is such a big decision for them, and they do want it taken care of, but they're definitely using the web more as an information-gathering tool than to actually apply with some people who they've never met, don't know, haven't heard of. So far, the internet-only companies are getting some business, but it's not a tidal wave.
No, well, I think you make a case in all the interviews, not all of them, but a lot of them, we've bandied about numbers, and I think there's kind of a general consensus that it's pretty hard to see beyond them getting 15, possibly 20% of the market directly, because, as you say, people still want their hands held. They want service that's right in front of them. They want somebody they can call any hour of the night, and so do realtors.
Yeah, the realtors, I'll tell you, that's the other thing is the better the source of your business. So, for example, my realtors, when people start telling them about the internet, and I'm going to go do this and that, the stronger the influence of the realtors, the less likely they are to do that, because the realtors will tell them, look, I've never heard of this company. I don't know who they are. I don't know if your loan will close on time. And if you go to hopefully Frank Donnelly, your loan will close on time. I know this. I've known him for X amount of years. So the call-ins that people are getting of pure rate shoppers, they're much more likely to go on the internet. But that's just another reason why relationship forming is so important, because those lead sources will be the ones to tell the people that this guy has a track record, he will close your loan, it will be the same rate that you agreed upon, and slide them toward their people that they know and trust.
That being said, though, once again, to be a little bit of a devil's advocate, I do think you'd have to agree that the internet has done one thing, and that is it certainly has cut the margins where the people that you're talking to today, in the old days, you could maybe whack on an extra half point, 3/4 of a point without too much trouble. Today, it's just much more difficult to get overage.
No question about it. And again, I did said earlier that I think the margins are going to be lower, and the loan officers, individual loan officers, are going to have to get bigger in order that and again, it is getting easier, though, too, to do a loan, where in the old days you had to hand carry this, and it was like having a baby each loan. Now, with the movement of information so rapidly, it is easier, so we'll be able to, at the same number of hours work, do many more loans at a lower volume. But again, it goes back to efficiency, and yes, the information flowing on the internet rate-wise is going to cost us some money.
I have to just say here, caution you, I want to switch topics, although it's tangential to what we've been talking about. I do not want to get into anything proprietary. I caution everybody on that. Having said that, how about talking about some of the efficiencies that you make use of in terms of your processing and closing, and how they help you maintain and keep your business, once again, without getting into any corporate secrets.
Sure, we don't want to get into any corporate secrets, but also I think a lot of companies are going to sort of control business arrangements with title companies or company-owned title companies where, for example, instead of having couriers to deliver the package, that we soon will be able to print our closing documents right into the office of the settlement company. And I think that even with companies that are, in other words, even if you don't have a controlled business arrangement, we will soon be able to print offices to even unrelated companies, title companies, in order to close the loans more efficiently. The other thing is in our company and many others, still there is the whole file is a lot of paper, and in the future I can see that especially with DU and LP, information being transferred almost totally electronically. So that's going to save a few days and some time, certainly some time and effort on the process. The other thing is right at loan application, frequently with the use of some of the front-end processing systems, there won't be, say, a second input into ACT, for example. In other words, my personal database will come right off of the applications that I take. I personally I have almost every loan application I've taken at Crestar, my previous employer. So for the last 11 years, I have every loan application, short a few, that I have taken. So, when someone calls me, I can easily update their information. I think that's not a new tech way, but it's a low tech way. But certainly people feel like, oh, Frank knows my information already. It's much easier if I get a loan from SunTrust. He already has all my information. And, of course, it does change, but many of the things will still be the same. And I think people, that's kind of a merging of low tech and high tech, how you can help a lot of customers.
Yeah, and I don't even think that you need that, to have, I'm sure you don't mean you have a whole loan file, but
No.
having the names of of one of the kids, that knowing it's Sally, and maybe their age is, that's very useful information to have.
Yeah, I just have every application.
Yeah.
Not the whole file, but just the application.
Yeah, just having even a minimum amount of information just helps you in a relationship. In the old days, when I called on realtors, I used to have a shoebox, and I still think it's one of the great methods where you write everything down, and so when you go in there, you know their nickname, you know who their kids' names are, and it's nothing more than a version of that.
Right, the shoebox is. This is the digitalization of the shoebox.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to change subjects just to a short degree, I'd like to talk about processors and how a processor can help you. And I wonder if you would talk about relationships in general with your processing staff, and maybe even go over to underwriters too, if you'd like.
Sure. I've had the same loan processor for about 6 years, and I think we complement each other very well. I'm kind of a nurture type person where I, take care of the customers and learn about them and this and that, and my processor is very analytical. Give me the information. Hello, Mr. Johnson, I need this, this, and this. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now. So I think we do complement each other very well. I think that is very important. And here at SunTrust, what we will do is we call the processors mortgage analysts so that people know that they're professionals right up front, which ours are. Not all are in the whole industry, but ours certainly are. Also, the fact that they are called also our inside salespeople, meaning they also have customer service expectations. They have expectations of us as internal customers of theirs, so we have expectations of them. But also, since they are our internal sales staff, they do have and learn about providing customer service to our outside customers, our realtors, other vendors that we deal with. So I think that the professionalism of our quote-unquote inside sales staff has furthered my career very much, and I do show my appreciation to them in a variety of ways.
Yeah, I think when you say that, in that last statement, I think anybody who is a loan officer today and wants to be successful, if they do not take care of their loan officer, and however way they want to do it, they're a fool. And you need to have that close relationship with the processor. And you have had good histories, and you have a real nice story to tell with the processor. But I'm sure you certainly know of stories. I mean, I've experienced. I think everybody has at some point where you have a processor who is either not doing a good job, switching jobs all over the place, going for the next buck, and a processor who you don't have a good relationship with can actually they can put you out of business if they want.
No question about it. And if they don't put you out of business, they will make it so hard for you to do business that you will never get to the next level. If you're taking care of some of the administrative things, and you can't spend time on selling and talking with your clients, so it's critical.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any special things you do to bring in business and beyond your contact management program that you find effective, stuff that maybe you're not thinking about right now? Let me give you one that people bring up now and then that I happen to really think is neat. I never used it myself, but I'm amazed at the amount of business these loan officers bring in, and that is things like magnets that you put on ice boxes, that have their names and everything.
Sure. The gadgets, we have some guys here who, I do not specialize in those things. I would rather do things because of my personality with my agent. So rather than giving them a magnet, we have a booth at the Skybox, rather, at the MCI Center. So I tend to spend more time doing things like that, kind of a one-on-one. I do have a few things, a business card holder that I have my assistant send out. That's the other thing I was going to touch on real quick about my loan processor, my personal assistant, who I take care of, excluding the company, if she has an overwhelming workload, she's allowed to and encouraged to give other work, like tracking down insurance policies, to my assistant, so that she can spend her time on her number one priorities rather than some of the lower ones. And by the same token, I'm able to concentrate on my number one priorities, which are getting in front of clients and not worry about that. Mm-hmm. So I think that has helped a lot. The other thing that I'm doing to try to get business, it's not a handout or anything, although we, from time to time we do those. I'm becoming a certified financial planner, and I'm about...
Oh, great.
Yeah,
that's not the easiest thing in the world either.
No, it isn't. I've spent a lot more time studying than I thought was going to be necessary.
That's right.
I think that designation, assuming I get through the course, will help me a lot. And if nothing else, certainly I'll have a more well-rounded view of, in becoming a financial expert in showing people how the mortgage piece fits into the other aspects of their financial life. So that is one thing I'm definitely doing that's, so to speak, outside the box.
That's interesting. You were the first one that's, I always like it when I talk to someone that brings up something new, and that's why I think no matter the number of interviews that I do with these top people in our business, it's rare that I'll go through a conversation where one little nugget comes through that's really new and kind of surprises me. That one is, I happen to like it. Years ago, I did a version of that where I wanted to learn a little bit about commercial loans and do a couple commercial loans on the side. Someone had asked me, and of course I didn't know jack about it. So I ended up signing up for a couple of the CCIM courses. As there's 5, and you can get a designation. Well, anybody who knows what a CCIM course is know that it's like living death. Each of them lasts a week, and it is like dying. They pull your guts out and put them back in a rearranged order, but you sure do learn the business. So I think having that kind of a designation really helps when you're working with clients, and the fact that you can point that out to them, it gives them a certain confidence, like going to CPA.
Mm-hmm. Certainly differentiates yourself. Also, I think that people have, it gives you kind of somewhat of an instant credibility with people, although usually you have to earn your credibility over time. As more and more people learn about this particular financial planning designation, I think that people will appreciate that, and it doesn't. Then you maybe don't have to deal with someone or they don't have to know about you for 6 or 8 months or a year to know that you are a professional, you take your job very seriously, and that you respect people and generally have their best interests at heart and a fiduciary responsibility. So I'm hoping that will, that's still a year away. It takes about 15 months these days to get one. So I'm about a little under a year away. So hopefully next year that will be, I'll do a lot of advertising about that, and I will do a campaign to let people know about that.
I'm sure you will. I would hope you would. For all the money and time that you spend doing it. It's the same thing as getting a CMB. Pat has one. Getting that certified mortgage banker.
Sure.
That means a lot having that designation. It says you're an expert and you've spent the time. I think as proof of that, you see a lot of the realtors today that are getting the GRIs and getting different. Some of the cards that you see today, the good realtors, have 4 or 5 designations on them.
Alphabet soup.
Yeah, right.
No question about
it. Exactly. In today's business, are you doing 100% from realtors now, or are you doing anything with new homes, CPAs, attorneys, or whatever? You still concentrate on what you think you do best?
Yeah, I would say that is the case, and I did learn early about calling on realtors. I do belong to the NVAR, which is the Realtors Association. Also, I'm, of course, meeting new financial planners, and I do have a few, and I'll tell you, they have the right demographic. In other words, the customers of theirs who go to financial planners have money, are buying expensive homes, and they also seem to be doing a lot of transactions. In other words, they seem to be opinion leaders in their communities, so that when their children buy homes, I'm getting some of those transactions. Also, some of them are downsizing, but they always seem to have something going on. and perhaps that's why they do see a financial planner. I've sent some flyers to CPAs. You must do that at the right time of year. Right now, we're a couple days here from April 15th. This isn't the right time to.
Oh no! I tried to call mine yesterday. They're in their death spiral now.
They're in a death spiral. So you do have to call them at the right time of year. But I think that although my new business that I try to get is from realtors, my network, because I've been databasing for so long, and I do ask for referrals. I think that I do have a wide net spread, but mainly in the business people that I go for, now I would say I do call on some financial planners, but primarily realtors. And the new home builders is its own area, and I just haven't explored that. Maybe in the future. Yeah,
not too many people, I think, try and work both ends of the deal. I mean, you do see people, but it's a hard thing to cross over on, doing both of them. What about, I want to talk about training for a little bit. I know your company is one of the more advanced and progressive in the way they view training. How do you feel about loan officer training? You think, generically, not associated with your company, actually, is there not enough of it? Should they get more? Not trying to necessarily lead you on because of the type of company that I have.
I would say no. I don't know of anyone in our industry who would say that we have that as a whole that we are on the top 10% of industries in teaching people. Loan officers seem to be one of those businesses where if you have a producing branch manager, they have their own time concerns. And it's a lot of learning by experience. I do think that most companies now, especially the large ones, do have an organized training process that will help them, but maybe half the business is your product knowledge and maybe half is relationship building, and that is harder to teach for sure. But as far as the other thing that I think is helping is that in the past many times people would take a loan and not realize, a 7-year balloon can't go 95. Well, you wouldn't find this out until a week before or until it went to the underwriters. Now with some of these, with DU and LP and some of the front-end systems, when you put that information in at the beginning of the loan, you realize you have a problem and that you either need an exception or need to tell a customer we have to go to plan B. Whereas in the past, it would be a bomb going off the day before settlement. So maybe technology is helping us in that way as well.
What about, you've indicated that you use ACT. What other ways do you manage your time? With the volume that you do and the amount of loans that you do, it would seem to me, just on the face of it, that you have to manage your time very carefully. I didn't ask you if you're married, had children, had other obligations on top of it, but how do you manage your time? And what time do you take off for yourself?
Well, I'll tell you that I found that for me personally, since I am on the phone literally all day, that most of my paperwork I either must do before work in the morning, early in the morning, or later in the afternoon. Now, people, I don't have any children yet, although that's next on my agenda. I just got married in September.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But so that'll be another dimension. But it is definitely you must be focused to be successful in our business because of the time constraints. And what people really need to do is make sure that they are spending their time on things that earn them, on activities that earn them money, like seeing the realtors, talking to people, talking to customers, talking to referral sources. And during the day, especially when you're just starting out, it is not okay to, say, spend 2 or 3 hours on paperwork and not see the clients. That's the kind of stuff that I think if people want to go to the next level, that's the kind of activities that can be done after business hours or before business hours or on weekends, depending on the urgency. But the daytime hours must be spent talking to people who can make you money. And doing paperwork generally is not one of those things.
You say you have an assistant.
Yes.
I wanted to question you on that. You're starting to see that a lot with your better realtors. where they're hiring their own assistants, literally pay them out of their pocket, and doing very well
Sure.
by leveraging themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that it helps you leverage yourself?
No question about it. And some of the other niceties, for example, every closing gets a quote-unquote personalized thank you from me, and it is handwritten. It is not handwritten by me, unfortunately, but that's the kind of thing that those little niceties or things that I personally did not do. Now, I've had this assistant, Suzanne, for 3 years now, and I'd say 2 years prior to that, and they completely manage my database for me, send out thank you letters. Also, once a month, they'll go through my database and see who the people are who have either a 5-year balloon or a 5-year arm and taken it out 4.5 years ago, or a 723 that's been taken out 6.5 years ago, and they will generate a letter to those folks. They take care of sending out my newsletters to my entire database, which is important. Other things that come up, the time wasters, and if you are going to take it to the next level, if you can pay someone, I'm making up a number, $10 an hour, certainly our time needs to be worth more than that. So anything that can be pushed down, so to speak, to someone who earns less money, it certainly should be. And I've been lucky to have an assistant for 3 years, where a lot of times, that's a 1-year job or 6 months, and then you go through training and training and training. So that has helped me a lot in the last few years, especially '98 when we were hitting on all cylinders.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of loan officers out there who are making good money, have the ability to do it, and they kind of they're thinking a little bit cheap and saying, well, I can send a letter out, I can do this or that. But the fact of the matter is, for every 10 letters that they sit down and send out, and they $50 or $75 they saved, the reality of it is they lost $500 in commissions because they didn't get another deal where they didn't establish a relationship.
Mm-hmm. No question about it. The other thing is that usually people wait or want to wait till they get to the next level until they hire an assistant, and really that's what does get you to the next level. It's like, I work for a big company. A lot of big corporations are not the fastest to move, but if I waited, and my company does now have kind of a system for independent assistants, but if I had waited, that was 5 years. I've had mine for 5 years. So if you need to make a move, I would not wait. If you work for a big company, definitely don't wait for them. And again, hiring an assistant is what takes you to the next level. It's not something you do when you get there, because it'll just take so much longer to do so. And definitely, activity breeds activity, and the more capacity to do business that you create, the more you'll want to go out and get.
I couldn't agree more with you. I think that's a good point for our listeners out there. I wonder if you talk about something, we talked just a bit about it when you were talking about time management, and that is, and if you could direct your comments to the people, the listeners out there, and that is this whole concept of rejection and how to handle rejection. We're in a rejection business. I know when I trained loan officers years ago, I used to tell them that we're in a rejection business, but there's a caveat to it, and the caveat is it's not a personal rejection. It's not because I don't like you, except in rare cases. It's because I got a better price, someone gave me better service. But nonetheless, we're in a rejection business, and I think there's a lot of young people, young loan officers out there, men and women, who really have a tough time facing up to that. And I just wonder if you could address that.
Sure. I'll tell you one thing. When I was new, I was more worried about the rejection that I would get if the realtors would not spend time talking to me, rather than, you have to compete pretty much for every deal, and you will win some and lose some. And I usually didn't feel as bad about that as when a realtor just wouldn't talk to me. So I think that as your reputation grows and as you prove yourself, you have an ability to do the job and do a good job, I think then you find that the realtors don't look at you as a salesperson as much as an advisor, and they will seek your advice. Where when I was new and I'd see, go into the realtor's office and suddenly I'd see him pick up the phone and pretend to be talking, And I said, man, someday, I said to myself, I didn't like that. And I took that rejection as, someday that person will wish they were dealing with me. And maybe that person has the problem, so to speak, and if they just knew what I could do for them, they'd be coming to my office rather than me coming there. So I almost got energized by that kind of rejection, saying, you'll wish you were on my list of people I do business with. And I guess that's probably, at that time, certainly overconfidence in myself. But now I do think that I bring a strong value to realtors, and I think a lot of them do benefit because they work with me, and I'm more important than price, an ace here and ace there. So maybe if there's a way to turn that rejection into an energizer or a motivator, that would be in everybody's interest.
How did you specifically handle two types of people in the realtor offices, that front desk, which can either be a help or an obstacle, and also the manager of the office? Anything specifically you did?
Well, I definitely have found, and this was looking back, in that the offices that I really did a lot of business with, I was on a first-name basis for sure with the managing broker in the office, and I always knew the receptionist as well. And I didn't really realize that when I was doing it, but looking back, every office, like I say, every office that I was doing a lot of business with, it just naturally happened. So I think if I were to go back and do it all again, I would get to know those people as a priority right off the bat, because they can help you get in. They can help you get your sheets or get your information to the realtors, other realtors more efficiently. But knowing the managing broker is critical, whether you have to take them to play golf or do something. If you want to be a force in an office, you got to get to know the broker and do it sooner rather than later.
What about, and I think we'll maybe wrap up on that note, or one question after that. How did you deal with realtors, or how do you deal with realtor managers in the new environment that we're in, where you're finding a lot of offices, they have affinity relationships, they have their own mortgage subsidiaries, and there is kind of that unwritten, in some cases very forceful push to direct agents into their own subsidiaries. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's certainly true here in Northern Virginia. Virtually every real estate company of some size has an affinity relationship. But I think many times, and you don't know till you ask, a lot of them are using mortgage brokers, where there's definitely some products. In our area, it happens to be a local bond program, VHDA, that they cannot do. Also, maybe you have to help them advertise. Or there's many times that I found that although they must refer X amount of business to the controlled business arrangement, they don't have to do it all, and sometimes the broker will not like, or for whatever reason, doesn't trust the loan officer. So it initially slowed me down a little bit. One office I'm thinking of in particular happened to hire, miraculously, a competent, good loan officer. So many of them are not, though. And again, the broker has to put the face on that I'm a company man, but I would not let that discourage me. And I know that they can't do, their affinity partners cannot do every deal, and many times they'll never tell you, but they may not trust or like their loan officer. So be in a position and even approach them that, I know you have an affinity relationship, but here's what I can do. And so from time to time, they'll go on vacation or whatever the case may be, but you don't have to go in there trying to defeat that. You can go in there as the adjunct to the business, and I think that the manager will appreciate it, and I think that it will be a successful strategy.
Well, I think I'm going to end up on that high note. I think that's a valuable lesson, because there are a lot of loan officers out there that are hitting offices in today's environment where they're running into loan officers that actually have desks in these offices. And in some cases, in larger offices, you have a loan officer sitting there all day long. And it really shouldn't discourage you. You just have to work around it, and it depends on the relationships that you have. Anyway, I wanted to thank you very much, Frank, for your time. I think all the listeners out there certainly appreciate it, and some of your tips are very valuable. And you have a lot of experience, and certainly wish you the best.
Thank you very much, John.
Okay.